Hello, everybody. Welcome to another amazing episode of the Production Problems Roadshow. Oh, I'm so sorry. We changed it. It is, again, the SecurityFWD channel. Today, we have our guest and big sleepy college boy, Nick. Thank you for joining us on spring break, and good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Morning did end 6 minutes ago, so good afternoon. But I still just woke up. But I'm happy to be on after last week's show had to be cut a little short.
Yeah, so we've had some persistent issues with our internet out here. I think at this point we are going through Spectrum, Starlink, and LTE. So if we go down this time, it's not for lack of trying. So with that being said, we're going to launch into some of the topics we didn't get to talk about too much last week. And I also want to say, of course, hello to everybody in the chat. It's great to see you all again. It's good to see Zam, 8-Bit, Nerdworks, and of course, everybody else who's joined us. So if you have any questions in the chat, we're going to try to answer them because we didn't really get to do our Q&A because we had some network issues still. So if you have any questions you'd like us to answer, especially on the Android Studio hacking series that Nick has been working on, he's been contributing a really great series for anybody who wants to get into bug hunting because it allows you to get started doing so with Android applications, even if you don't have a spare Android phone to do it on, which I think is super cool. So if you have any questions, especially about Android Studio, please ask them in the chat and we'll try to pause and answer them. But it's great to see everyone here again because, yeah, man, we've missed you with all these internet issues preventing us from going live the last week. So, all right, so one thing I wanted to just jump in on, and I believe that probably Zam would have a couple things to say about this as well, is 3D printing. So the intersection between hackers and makers kind of like comes together and into focus with 3D printing because it's a fascinating process that is really, really cool. And even if you don't make your own 3D models, the process of printing can be incredibly useful and cool. And Nick just got his first 3D printer, how many days ago? Like 2 days ago?
Yeah, I got it. Today is Friday, and I got it Wednesday night.
Yeah, so Nick is fully in the early stages of learning to use, set up, and print with a 3D printer. I've had one for about a year, and I know Zam has also gone crazy on just really getting into 3D printers, using everything there is out there to upgrade them and making them do more than they were originally designed or maybe even supposed to do. And that's kind of the spirit of hacking, I feel like, really goes along well with 3D printers. And nowadays, you don't need to have like $500, $1,000 to get into 3D printing. The kinds of 3D printers that Nick and I are using are like $250. Frankly, there's a lot of other things that cost around that much money that feel pretty easy to spend money on. So, you know, $250 for a device that literally just creates something from nothing is pretty cool and an interesting hobby to get into. So if we were going to recommend one, if we could switch to my screen for a second, one that I would recommend and did recommend to Nick was the Creality Ender 3 Pro, just because the price on these has really come down. I've seen them for as low as like $190 sometimes when they're on sale, but generally you'll see them for around like $250 or so. And Nick, is this the printer that you got?
Yeah, that's the exact same one, and it is ridiculous how cheap these are. And there's like another part I really like about the Ender is what I'm starting to learn is like they're very popular, so there's a huge community around it, and they're especially like focused on modding it and just improving it in subtle ways. And so like a lot of the prints that you can do with this printer involve improving the printer itself. I don't know.
Yeah, for example, one of the first things I recommended to Nick that he print out is actually a little extension arm to hold the filament. So when it's feeding into the printer, it doesn't go in at an odd angle, which can cause it to break or cause other issues. So it's just cool that like you can immediately use the printer to upgrade itself in various ways to make it more reliable, more resilient against certain different things you might want to do. Or also you can, I've seen some people on my Twitter timeline like adding a like plotting pen to their 3D printer and instead making it make art. So there's all sorts of really cool things you can do to modify your printer once you actually get one. So this is one investment that I highly recommend for hackers who are looking for an interesting hobby. You know, there's a lot of people who might just like get a printer, make a couple things, and never follow up with it. But really, there's so much out there on Thingiverse and other websites for anybody who wants to get started that if you do want to make cool functional prints, for example, I in lockdown got really bored bored and wanted to make a temperature sensor that would broadcast over Wi-Fi the current temperature to everybody in the house, so you could look on your phone and see what temperature it was outside. And I even made a display that read it and then just put it on a screen. But in order to make it resilient outside, I needed to make it weather resistant, because otherwise it was going to fry itself in the freezing rain and whatever else. So I was able to print out a really nice weather screen, and this project has been out there enduring for, I think, like 6 months or so now, which is a really cool example of how a 3D printer can take an idea and make it into something that will actually stand the test of time, at least for, maybe a year or so, which, would not be possible if you didn't have some sort of enclosure for it or some sort of other way of making it more resistant to the elements. So a little bit of 3D printing can make you anything from a full-on drone to just an enclosure for a project that you want to make more resistant to wear and tear. So it's really a way that you can get started making things you're already doing more useful. And that could just be, you broke the handle off in your Honda Accord or something, and you want to print a new one. These little plastic parts break off all the time, and it's certainly convenient that car people have measured all of them and stuff and entered them into the database. I just find that 3D printing comes in handy in ways you would never imagine being convenient, and then suddenly, oh, wow, that part that I've been dreading replacing on my car can suddenly just be 3D printed and attached in a matter of minutes. So, Nick, I was also going to say, for absolute beginners who are looking to get into 3D printing, how would you describe like the first couple day experience? Like, what do you need to learn in order to get started with this, and what might be frustrating or might throw you off the trail if you were getting into 3D printing?
Well, I was a little lucky, and I got my 3D printer used. I'm actually just borrowing it, but I'm probably going to buy it pretty soon. So it was already assembled. So I'm pretty sure the Ender 3 you have to assemble yourself no matter what. And I hear that can be a little bit tricky. So just make sure you have the right tools on hand. But once you actually get started printing, like obvious like sources like YouTube and Thingiverse are good places to start. And yeah, and just really get started printing. Like YouTube and Thingiverse is where I've spent most of my time, but I'm only on like day 3 of who knows how much.
Yeah, and another thing I would say is once you get started printing, I really recommend Cura as your slicing program, which will allow you to take any print that you find on Thingiverse and convert it into a format that's ready to print on your printer. And I also highly recommend setting up Octoprint so that you can connect to your printer, upload stuff without needing to go out there, take out the SD card, put it into your computer, upload it. Like it's just a whole different printing experience. And being able to take a peek in on your print and see how it's doing or make a time lapse automatically is a really cool bonus upgrade to just adding Raspberry Pi to manage the printer. So I waited a year before I did that. Really wish that I'd done it immediately. And I know, Nick, you've been kind of fascinated by the process as well of adding an additional utility to modify and work with the printer.
Yeah, that's what I did yesterday. I would be able to show it off right now, but I did turn my printer off this morning. So, but it's Octopi is great. In case the listeners don't know, it's just you attach it has to be at least like a Raspberry Pi 3. It has to be a somewhat more powerful Raspberry Pi. But as long as you have one of those, you just plug it into the serial port on the 3D printer, and it gives you like a web interface. To send prints to the printer, to check the status of your printer, and like you're saying, if you have a webcam connected to it, then you can get a live feed of the printer. And there's various services, free services, that allow you to almost port forward that and to see those printer settings like from anywhere.
Yeah, which is super, super cool. So okay, I also wanted to take a second. And Nick, do you happen to have Divas up?
Diva? Oh, let me open it. Give me a minute.
Sure.
And
so
I'll have
one thing I wanted to again draw everyone's attention to is if you haven't, and we can go back to the chat while I mention that, is if you haven't checked out Nick's series on just getting started with Android hacking, it's really, really cool, and kind of the star of it is this vulnerable application that allows you to practice these skills. So if you want to just kind of go from absolutely getting started to solving some of the harder challenges, we've put together a playlist, and I'd love for Nick to show off a little bit about, kind of show this awesome tool that you can use, and you can kind of follow Nick along on this series if you get lost, confused, or if you just want somebody to guide you through how to do these challenges and see for yourself.
Yeah, so we can go ahead and switch to my screen. It's already now. So in case you haven't seen the videos before, basically the problem we're trying to solve is testing exploiting Android devices, because they're a very popular operating system, but not many people have experience with like command line interfaces using Android or hacking Android at all. So to get around the issue, you can download Android Studio for free, which is a developer tool for people making Android apps. And you can use the built-in Android virtualization to create a virtual Android operating system basically on a computer. And so it interacts like how any other virtual operating system would on your computer, except that's a phone, so the interface is a little bit different. But to make this device more exploitable, or more specifically to simulate exploitable features of different apps on the phone, you can download this free app called Diva on the internet. And this is an app that's about like 3 or 4 years old now, developed by this Indian software company that comes with 13 different challenges that you can try to crack various issues with the phone. So like the first couple we went over in the first video were just insecure logging. So this involved if an app asked you to input, like for example, a credit card number, and for some reason you put in that credit card number wrong, it would spit out an error, and then the phone's logs would read the credit card number in that error, which is not something good.
Some of the, I was going to mention
And,
also some of the other things like translate really well directly over to web applications. So while web application pen testing is a little bit more common, like most of the stuff that you've taught in the last several videos we've done, like this, kind of directly translate over to the way web applications do what they do.
Yeah, there is a lot of similarities with that, especially with there's a couple like command injection things, which I always think is really fun. Like I think it's this one. That is one of the command injections. But there's a command injection with SQL where you give the app like a malformed SQL line of code, and then it just spits out all the information because it doesn't know what to do, which is like it's very similar. It's very analogous to like web app hacking. Yeah. Command injections like my favorite
So if you guys want to see more of this also, Nick is going to go through and do the final challenges on the Diva app. And we're also looking for other suggestions on things we can cover for Android app hacking or just web application hacking in the future. So if you like this series, if you want to see more of this, make sure to catch our upcoming live stream. I think we're probably going to do one on maybe Tuesday or maybe next Tuesday, because I think we might have Satonic on. I guess we'll see. But either way, this is a really, really great series for anybody who wants to get started in bug bounty hunting. So yeah, I think that you guys will probably really enjoy the final one. Okay, let's go also over something that we are going to do next week. I just wanted to let everyone know, if we switch to my screen, last, I think like 2 weeks ago, we did, or was it last week? March 17th. Oh my gosh, time is just like going. Okay, so on March 17th, we did a crossover episode with Null Byte, and it has 32,000 views, which is great for a live stream. We also hit over 1,000 comments like before the end of the episode. So it was really, really great. We had lots of input. And I think we're going to do it again. So if you want to tune in to another one of these great crossover episodes where the chat is going absolutely crazy and we have tons of people in, then check it out next Wednesday, because we're going to be doing another one. And we'll have Killian on again to do another really great demo. So if you want to see that, check it out on Wednesday, and I'm really excited to do another one because, man, our chat really gets intense. I think we are going to be changing the background, so it's a little bit less distracting. We got some feedback on that, so thank you for your feedback on those live streams. Some other thing that I wanted to mention, just because it came up in my timeline. I did these kind of a while ago, but I'm constantly amazed by how the community reacts to Canary tokens. They're free, really easy to use tracking tokens that can be used in a variety of different super sneaky contexts. And if you haven't checked them out already, we did a couple really awesome series on them, and we even had someone from Thinkist Canary, the company that makes Canary tokens, come on and show us some of the sneakiest and craziest ways you can use this. And Nix, for example, like some of the things you can do is you can have like in a document, anytime the document is opened, it does a DNS query, which then triggers the Canary token. Or you can embed the Canary token in like a startup process so that anytime the computer comes online and connects to the internet, it immediately hits the Canary token. Or even better, you can have a canary token hidden in like the root of a file server, so anytime someone accesses it, and this was actually used successfully to determine that somebody had taken a decommissioned server that was supposed to be wiped, and then later accessed the root of the file server by trying to recover it. It basically, again, pings a DNS server, and yeah, it's really cool. So it's an interesting way that you can use a free resource to do all the things I just mentioned and more. So if you want to check them out, Canary Tokens are a really, really cool free resource that I highly recommend. Nick, have you ever used a Canary token?
Yeah, I remember talking to you when you first like discovered them. I just found out about all those advanced uses, but I've been like able to like create like dummy links that are able to like pull information from the person who clicks that link. But I didn't know it went as far as like putting it in a Word doc. That seems like it would be really good for like corporate surveillance, or even like a corporation like making sure that no one's going somewhere on a computer where they shouldn't be. It's like a good tripwire, it seems like. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, imagine putting it in, for example, like a media file that's like going out, like a film that's being considered for an Oscar or something, and it's being sent out like a screener, and then like somebody copies the screener and like sends it around. Like they would immediately know like which screener had like started making the rounds, because anytime someone opened that unique file, maybe it sends the file hash like along with you know, the other query. My other non-traditional use of Canary tokens I love exfiltrating data with them. I'll use code to gather information and then send that back as the referring URL, and that's another really cool thing. So not going to go into it too much more, aside from just saying it's a really great resource, and if you haven't already checked it out, then you definitely should. Okay, Nick, do you know how NFTs work?
No, I don't.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite Twitter threads on NFTs. And I should just point out, this doesn't apply to all NFTs. This just applies to a lot of like very well-known NFTs that are backed by technology that's actually not very robust and will almost definitely fade into obscurity within a decade or so. Anytime you have like a startup, for example, doing a guarantee on something and the company has no like real staying power, you basically set yourself up to have something that is not going to be there in about a decade or less. So this is a great Twitter feed on exactly what NFTs are and how they're supported by infrastructure that often looks like it's probably going to be erased in not that long. It's a really interesting look at kind of the risks of buying an NFT or what it means to do so. So if you haven't checked this out already, again, this doesn't apply to every single one. It just applies to ones that use like a weak infrastructure or an infrastructure that relies on a company that may or may not be there in a couple years. And it's definitely worth a read if you're hearing people getting excited about NFTs, but they don't know like what that actually means for whether it's going to be there in 5 years. Okay, this is a technique that I didn't know about and kind of blew my mind. If you find a private SSH key, how do you find out whose it is? Nick, like, how would you even start?
I have no idea. I think I would have to get their public key in order to know that, but that seems impossible.
Yeah, so apparently you can just SSH git at github.com and then supply the private SSH key, and it will spit out the username.
Wait, why? wait,
yeah,
why?
So that's interesting. Again, a very interesting like OSINT technique, basically, to like reverse like who belongs to that private key. But heck, that kind of seems a little sketchy.
They have to have like use SSH to access like their GitHub though. They have to have like set that up, right?
I don't know. I don't really know. So this is definitely a feed to check out. But apparently from the feed, it also works on other services. So this works on Bitbucket as well, and probably other services. So this is just more of a generic technique you can use to try to like log into a service by, I guess, just supplying the SSH key. So very interesting. If you want to test this out for yourself, I'd be very curious to know whether it is still working. Oh, and Nick, can you see if you're able to? You should also monitor the chat just in case some good questions.
Oh yeah.
And one example, also, I wanted to point out of a previous tool that we've suggested, in this case, LuLu by Patrick Wardle, working, is this. If you have an Xcode project that has an infection with XcodeSpy, it'll basically try to pop a reverse shell and take over your computer. But the good news is, if you have a product that's looking for, or a service or something running that's looking for suspicious behavior, like for example, a bash shell just randomly trying to connect to a sketchy IP address, then you will be warned rather than just having this go off. And that gives you the control to press block and basically prevent this random sketchy thing that should not be spawning a bash shell from being able to take over your system. So I really like Patrick Wardle's projects. I love examples of them working. And in this case, watching it defeat an attempt by some spyware to take over your system and create a backdoor is really satisfying. So if you haven't already installed Patrick Wardle's tools on any macOS systems you have, I highly recommend you do, because they do a great job of stopping this sort of thing. And you can find them at Objective-C. That's objectivesee.com. Or you can just Google Objective-C. Okay, this is something fun. When setting up a new computer, or rather a new Apple account, I realized that Apple forces you to pick security questions, most of which could be solved by like a very precise Google search. They ask you things like, what high school did you go to? What was your first address? Like all the kind of things where if you put someone's like first and last name into a people search, it would tell you their previous addresses. Like you could figure out things like where was your first work by like looking at their LinkedIn. Like it's just it seems like terrible practice to not allow people to create their own security questions that are a bit more challenging. So it forced me to up the ante and relive all the times I had to walk. I'm not going to try to make the name of my pet, but this incredibly long secure password. And now I have to like store like multiple secure passwords. It's just such a headache. Like if anybody from Apple's listening, please just let people make their own security questions. Like why did I have to do this? But it is a way that you can get around that sort of thing. Now, I also just want to point out and mention, because it's making the rounds on security Twitter, there's a lot of pushback on Richard M. Stallman joining the board of the Free Software Foundation. Just wanted to point out that that was a terrible move. Moving on. And I'm saying this, of course, in a private capacity. I'm not representing any organization, but just wanted to just point that out. Tor project, lots of other projects have come out in opposition to this, because bad behavior shouldn't be tolerated in exchange for someone's contributions. You really can't sum up the number of contributions that have been lost from the community by having someone who's pushing people out. So yeah, just wanted to point this out. The free and open source software community really does not need people who make other people not want to be in it. Okay, so one thing that I love for OSINT is finding sneaky ways of putting together large amounts of, let's say, evidence or other sorts of things that are generally hard to find. Now, Nick, do you have TikTok?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Well, then you know that occasionally you'll be just scrolling, maybe it's just me, you'll just be scrolling, and then all of a sudden you'll just see like a cartel video of just like a crime scene, or them like fleeing the police in a boat. Like, have you ever seen this?
No, the algorithm hasn't got me with that yet.
Okay, well, one kind of odd thing about TikTok is there's a lot of these weird niches that are tied together by data points that are often difficult to get to. So obviously posting all of your activities, your criminal activities on TikTok is a pretty bad idea. But if you're a cartel operating in an area where they feel really secure, then they, just like anybody else, they know they're not supposed to upload videos to TikTok, but they do it anyway. I'm just like the US military has like tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of videos of training and deployments and other things that they're probably not supposed to share on TikTok. So do criminal organizations. So what's interesting is a lot of these videos are tied together by the sounds that they use. And these are selectable. Like you can basically go through, find a specific sound, and then add your video so it can be found by that sound. And some researchers were finding that you could use some of the narco songs, like the different songs that are specifically about specific criminal organizations that are popular among them, to locate massive amounts of videos of them just blatantly doing criminal stuff. So if you ever want to take a stroll down a very weird part of TikTok, or if you are a criminal investigator, then it's an interesting trick that you can use certain songs to organize large amounts of videos of people doing, again, like shootouts, boat chases, like all sorts of other things that you could probably get in trouble for, just with a couple sounds. So interesting OSINT technique if you're a journalist, if you are somebody who needs to do these sorts of investigations. Just to note that songs are now a really easy way to isolate content on TikTok, and depending on the song and depending on the organization, it can be more easy than you think. So never really thought about using songs to like go after information on a social media platform, but still pretty amazing. Okay, Nick, I have a question. What is the worst thing, cybersecurity-wise, you've ever seen when going into a doctor's office?
Worst thing, I don't poke around. I feel like I don't poke around the same way you do. So I haven't noticed anything very bad, but also haven't looked for anything very bad.
So you've never noticed like Post-it notes with like the passwords for like patient portal logins, or like USB ports on the monitor that like face towards the patient, or you've never been like put in a waiting room where there's just a logged in computer sitting there like right next to you?
I've never noticed it in a doctor's office, but I did at my high school.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. My high school did have a little sticky note with the like one of the door pins actually, and I tried. Me and my like dumb teenager friends tried it, and it did work. So that's the closest I come to that. But no, most of my doctor's offices, like the receptionist is like even pre-pandemic, is like completely walled off from the patients.
Yeah, so that has not been the case for me. When I go to my dentist office, I immediately notice when I connect to the guest Wi-Fi that I can also print from the printer, see recent documents they've printed, and change the music in the office. Then when I go into the patient room, I notice that there's a computer there, and when I point out that they're leaving me alone with the computer for like 20 minutes, like that potentially has patient files, they confidently tell me that all the data is in the cloud, at which point I point at the recycle bin, which is stuffed full of patient files. Then I go out to the receptionist area where they leave to make copies, and their monitor has a USB port facing towards me, the patient. Why? Like all of these, and then when I look across the desk, I see a giant sticky note with the login for the master patient portal as an admin, which would give me full access to everyone's billing like information. So like all these things make me go insane, but I never have any way of getting this across to the person who's in charge, because by the time I tell the staff or someone else, I'm like, I know that they're not going to pass that information to the boss at the end of the day. They have a full day ahead of them. They're probably going to write it down wrong, even if I give it to them. And there's no really good way of referring them. So I've been thinking that it would be really nice to have some way of, if you notice one of these issues, non-aggressively, but still in a way that somebody can actually fix it, giving them the information to let them know there's an issue and how to get it at least looked at, if not resolved. So if anybody else feels like this should be a thing, I've been kind of like slowly pushing towards, it could be a card, a sticker, like, I don't know. But I think an important thing would be some sort of companion website that allows people to discover like what the issue is and how to do something about it, because this happens so often in really critical businesses that I visit that I wish there was an easier way to do it. So if you've ever wished this too, please let me know and I will try to make this a thing. And I think this is probably a good time to check in on the chat. So let me go ahead and take a look. If you guys have any questions, again, let me know. And I would love to, I'm sorry, I just saw another dental horror story. And I would love to get them answered while we are here. But yeah, so Zuber visited a dentist where they had all the information on an Excel spreadsheet, like the social security number, name, address, phone number. I'm not surprised. Really, the number one thing for me is explaining like why having the printer accessible to guests is a bad idea. And they're like, well, like, what would they do with it? It's like, well, what do you print, buddy? They're like, well, like confidential medical stuff. It's like, well, like, it goes into the printer, and now they're in the printer. It's like they're in the same room. Do you see it's like they're very close to each other. You see how that might be an issue? They're like, wait, could they see the stuff coming out of the printer? I'm like, we're there. We did it. Like, yes, that is what could happen. So yeah, like there's lots of like HIPAA stuff, but like also like there's a lot of people who either don't understand HIPAA stuff or don't care about it until it bites them. So yeah, medical offices are particularly bad at this, but I mean, it could be anywhere, like anywhere that has some sort of like another example was an office that did retouching in audio for really big movies, but it was a small office, so they had like a local file server and all this stuff like right there, and then a guest network that would let anybody potentially connect to this stuff, delete it, modify it, upload it, change it, whatever, ransomware it. So this sort of stuff is really tricky to get across to like maybe some of these older school business owners who just don't understand like what could happen to me? Are you threatening me? Do I need to call the cops? Like, you know, it's really a difficulty sometimes for getting this fixed in a business that either you go to, rely on, or just don't want to see go down in a heap of flames. Again, this is a money-losing prospect, and it can be difficult to get this across to business owners without making them feel bad or making them feel like you are being aggressive towards them. So
yeah, like threatened.
My hope would be like if there was a way to just like give them a sticker that says like, "Hi, you're doing a good job, but we did a checkup, and if you want to check these things out, you could really prevent your business a lot of problems." And then like explain to them like why the guest network shouldn't be like connected to the file share or like whatever.
Like almost like how food businesses have to put that letter grade. Like they get a health inspection every like 6 months or so.
Yeah.
Like there should be like a tech extension.
Yeah, like if they could get like a number of points, and then it's just like you're like even if they like put in that thing and it told them that they were doing better than some other businesses, I still feel like that would be just enough of a pat on the back and be like, you got a C+. Like for a guy that knows literally nothing about this, that's pretty good. You know, like
like when I go to a doctor's office, I want to like feel like reassured that they're going to be safe with my information. I don't know. Maybe that's a future government office waiting to be opened.
Yeah. So Zam said that he often sees the printer's built-in Wi-Fi network open. You would not believe. So one of the first things I do as a hacker is I will turn on Wiggle Wi-Fi and I will walk through a building, and then I will just go back and look. It's like, hey, are there any open access points for a printer? And if there are, I basically have my first step in getting access to someone's network, because very frequently I will look into the printer and they have the credentials for the Wi-Fi network in plain text. Or like some other such nonsense. Or sometimes you can save the configuration. So you save the configuration, and then if they don't scramble the password, you can go into the configuration file and just get the information from there. So like sometimes finding an open access point from a printer, but then like the printer is plugged physically into a network, like you can learn a lot from that. Potentially like previous setup, you can learn about other devices on the network. I found that it also gave you the login and password for a file share on the same network, because it was just there in the on the main configuration page of the printer. So like these are things that happen all the time, and yeah, it can be kind of difficult to get across to people who do this sort of thing. All right, so let's switch back to my screen for a second. This was a piece of news that Zam sent in, and this is hacker. Well, basically, this ties into Patrick Wardle's tool stopping an infected Xcode file. Well, believe it or not, people have been sending infected Xcode files. So these Xcode projects allow a XcodeSpy, which again we saw Patrick Wardle's tool defeating, to create a backdoor on their computer and start doing all sorts of malicious stuff. And this is something we've kind of seen as a trend, sending like infected development files. When we had that campaign against security researchers that was telling them, hey, I found this great 0-day, will you please take a look at it? And then sent them like a project to open, and as soon as they did, it infected their computers, which is kind of again an obvious play, but like, you know, hiding in plain sight. Like, what are you going to do? So this is just an interesting attack to note. Of course, if you're looking to make sure you're not affected by this, then again, I recommend you check out objectivec.com, because it's a good way of just looking for suspicious behaviors on your computer without necessarily needing to know ahead of time what that threat looks like, because this is an emerging threat, and it's just really hard to stay completely up to date with everything that's out there looking to infect your computer. Another thing that Zam sent in, which I'm actually way more excited about, is Nzyme. So this is more like an intrusion detection / attack detection system for Wi-Fi, but much more so than just like Kismet or like some of the other things that we have shown off that are able to miss a lot of different attacks because they're looking for very specific, very obvious interactions. Nick, have you ever used Kismet?
No, but I've been with you and you've explained it to me. I know a little bit about it. I guess I have briefly used it, but not extensively.
Yeah, it's like Kismet is very similar to Wireshark in that it's sniffing all
Yeah.
the packets that are coming in and giving you information about them, but it works on a different level. So it's moving up a level, and it's more focused on like device metadata, like what different networks has this device been connected to before? What different networks is it calling out for? Has it changed its MAC address? Has it changed its name? Is it pretending to be something new? It's looking for all the classic signs of an attack, and it's also looking for some signals intelligence information about what devices are nearby and what they're doing. Whereas Wireshark is just like we're looking through raw packets and we can filter them and stuff, but it's nowhere near as like signals intelligence oriented as Kismet is. Now, if we're looking to make that even more fine-tuned, there are projects that are looking for specific attacks that, such as the Wi-Fi Pineapple or Ponagachi. And this means that if we want to find these low-budget, easy-to-implement attacks, then we can. Well, I wouldn't say the Wi-Fi Pineapple is low-budget, but the Ponagachi maybe. Anyway, if we want to find these easy-to-implement, I guess we'll say, attacks, then we need to be a little bit more sensitive. We can't just be looking for the most obvious attacks. We should instead be looking for ones that might be a little bit less blatant, but still very easy for people to do. So I really like this tool because it's designed to basically look for that stuff and send you alerts when something looks amiss. And I haven't actually run this myself because I only got to see it for the first time just immediately before the show. But now I really want to because it has a web interface, which I love. I think that's a very cool way of making this accessible to anyone. And also, it seems to be focused on all the sorts of things that people have been asking us about repeatedly when we show them Wi-Fi hacking techniques. Because usually when people ask, hey, is it possible to detect these sorts of attacks? I have to be like, well, if you were like an IT administrator and like you were on Wireshark and you knew the right filters and you knew what they meant, then like, yeah, we could detect the attack. But like in reality, like that's a pretty specific guy. So like if you're just a normal person, what are the odds that you would detect a more sophisticated attack or one that's like doesn't immediately light up like Kismet or some other free tool or like whatever your internet service provider probably gives you, which is probably not that good. Nick, if you were trying to catch a wireless, let's say somebody was attacking your Wi-Fi network, how would you go about trying to like diagnose that? Like once the internet service provider was like, it's not us, it's not our end, it has to be something that's happening to you.
Like I would use services like Wireshark and see any like unfamiliar devices. I would probably purge my network. Just like probably I'll just like factory reset my router, and like just give them a completely new target to look at. But after that, I'm not sure. Like in between, I'm not sure of the specifics. Like being able to identify the attacker, I wouldn't know how to do exactly, unless he's using something like this.
Yeah, so we have like a whole variety of different tools that like allow us to potentially like go after like monitor different devices on a network or different activity. Like the Andromeda deauthor being a good example of like a signal hunting thing where we can put a directional antenna and start physically tracking down something that might be transmitting deauth packets. But if it's a more subtle attack, then we might need to go towards something like this. And that's what I mean. I would be the same way, basically, Nick. Like I would have a layered approach of probably Kismet to catch obvious things and then start looking at like weird Wireshark packets to try to figure out if there was something else like anomalous going on after doing an initial survey of my network and making sure nothing's attached that shouldn't be. But there's still a lot of things you could do, like kicking off a device that's supposed to be on the network and then joining as that device, and disguising yourself. Like there's lots of stuff that would make it pretty sneaky for you if you wanted to get around this. So I can't wait to try to see what kinds of automated attack detection I can break with this. And for example, how the advanced deauthor or the V3 deauthor does while attacking a network that's being monitored by this. So yeah, I want to break this. I'm excited about it. So if anybody else wants to see this, if you want to see this in action, maybe trying to detect some attacks, or if you want to see how I can be sneaky and like get around this Wi-Fi defense system. Again, this is like one person's project. It seems like this doesn't seem like it's like supported by some massive company. So I'm going to go a little bit easy on it, but it's still a very, very cool concept, and I'm really excited to try it out. So thank you for sending that in, Sam. I'm very excited to try this. I've been wanting to do some more Wi-Fi defense stuff, and this seems like one of the more straightforward projects Some of the other ones require either physical hardware or a lot of setup, and that's just not very beginner friendly. All right, I'm going to go back to the chat before we go much further and just see if you guys have any other questions for us to answer. So one question was, can you get a Pine phone and show us how to install Kali Nethunter on it and pentest on the go? I am actively planning a Kali Nethunter episode. I have the correct gear thanks to Nzyme. It turns out that the documentation for setting it up is not great. So the hour or two that I set aside to do it was not sufficient, and I had to put it down for a bit. But we are going to be covering Kali Nethunter, and also Nick, if you feel like doing anything on Kali Nethunter, you're welcome to jump on as well, because it does sound really cool. But frankly, no, I would say it is much more useful, and I would love to see it. So yeah, we'll give it a try. And we should probably do an episode on Android hacking with just Termux or some of the other things you can do without a rooted phone, because it's pretty interesting that even if you just get a hold of some random Android phone with no special tools, you can still emulate a Linux system and run some basic tools. Python tools, networking tools, OSINT tools, all that stuff works. Wi-Fi stuff doesn't work, which is unfortunate, and a big reason that Kali Nethunter would be superior. So we'll try to do that, because I would love to have a device that's compact, mobile, and lets me do Wi-Fi hacking. Frankly, that sounds great. Oh yeah, and Nzyme noted that, Patrick's tool is basically a response to this malware that's gone out that's been infecting people with Xcode files. Let's see. I found a Python denial of service Wi-Fi tool where we can deny service to devices on the network without the Wi-Fi password. Oh yeah. So this is one of the first examples of the deauthentication attack on a wide scale I saw was I think it was called the Wi-Fi Grenade or something, which is just a Python program that runs a very simple loop. It runs a scan for devices. If devices are found that weren't run in the previous scan, it adds them to a list, and then it attacks every single one in sequence. Then it runs the cycle again. It's probably the most simple program I've seen. Of course, it does tend to start attacking devices that were only up for a short period of time. So that there's a little bit of improvement that could be done. But the basic design is if you put this on a Raspberry Pi Zero and just left it in a public place, it would cause havoc. It would cause a very serious problem for quite some time. Nick, have you ever considered doing something like this?
No, not until right now.
Yeah, we had a lot of, when I worked at Byte, we had a writer who wanted to do the Wi-Fi Grenade, and it was basically a Pi 0W that would just ran this script that just attacked everything. And in the end, the owner of Byte was just interesting, and he really liked it, but the legal people would not let them do it. Because it's a purely destructive thing. It's basically just taking advantage of this flaw to just mess up everyone's day. And frankly, it's a good way to get in a lot of trouble, because if you go after the wrong business and they get really mad and they have the resources, they can legally pursue it and make it quite bad for you. So there's been some suggestions for Byte articles that we've had to not do, and that was definitely one of them. But I mean, yes, it's very simple to do these attacks. You don't need the Wi-Fi password, and anybody could do it. But I find that the versions that are the Wi-Fi deauthor, for example, that run on a little D1 Mini or something else that's cheap and easy to come by, are often the best way to do it, because it allows you a lot of precision. So you can only attack devices that you're allowed to, and you can still see the effect, but you don't have to go to jail. So another question was, do we have an in-depth live USB Kali tutorial video? So that's a good thing we might want to do. We've done a couple things that are based on a live USB, but doing a minimal Kali USB build that you could boot from anywhere, that you can change the boot order basically. Nick, do you think that might be something worth doing?
Yeah, I've done some stuff like that before, and yeah, it's super cool. But yeah, we could definitely look into it like a little more detail.
Cool. So maybe for that we could just pick out like a fancy USB stick that seems cool. That would be like an
Hmm.
ideal like Kali USB like boot stick, and just like talk about the kind of one you might have on your keychain or something. Because I know a lot of people carry around
Yeah.
like a keychain that has like a live USB stick on it, just because at our so at the school Nick and I went to, there were a bunch
Uh-huh.
of computers that had a hard coded password on their boot sequence. So, I mean, you could just Google the hard coded password and you can just go in and change any computer to boot from whatever source you want. So, if you just wanted to like have a Kali Linux computer at school, you could just like Google the password, type it in, change the boot order, and just boot from your USB stick, and then just swap it right back. And nothing changed on the computer. Not really sure if we were supposed to
Yep.
be doing that. We're never told to stop. But yeah, this is just a way where if there's a computer that's accessible and you just want to boot into Kali Linux real quick and do something, it's a pretty easy way of doing it. So yeah, I mean, Nick, you want to do an episode? We should do it. We should do that. It could go
Yeah.
along with
Yeah.
the
I think
other. Sorry, go on.
yeah, booting from thumb drives is like my favorite thing. It's really fun. I did some null byte. I did one or two null byte videos on booting Kali Linux from a USB, but it was mostly to show off like the big update that Kali got last year.
Mm.
So yeah, I've never specifically like focused on like picking the right like um, bootable USB to use and like how you'd like go about using it on a daily basis. So that sounds really fun.
Yeah, so um, one thing I have to mention is shout out to Zam for getting the Fold. He now has a folding laptop that we can test out some of these things on. So yeah,
Oh,
if you wanted to slap Kali Linux on the Fold, Nick's favorite computer, we could we could definitely see what that looks like. It would just be
wait, don't we have to go to space first?
yeah, that's so the marketing for this computer like exclusively shows people in space, and it led me to believe that like if you didn't work in space, you weren't allowed to buy one. So congratulations to Zam for apparently going to space to get this computer because it looks really cool. So one question we also had was, what order should learning to hack be done in? Like, should you first do programming and then networking later, or what should you do first? My response would be, if you want to learn to hack, learning networking, like basic networking and basic Linux. Those two things, like how to run a command line Python program, how to run a bash script, like what an IP address is, and how to find devices on a network. Like those very basic skills will provide the foundation for using already established tools that have tons of documentation that everybody else already uses. Like very few people in cybersecurity write their own tools. Most of them use tools other people have written very effectively in a sequence of processes, and the only thing they need to know is like the big picture and kind of the domain tools that they're going to be like using to go through and check that everything's fine. So personally, I would recommend. I find that I use my networking skills way more than I use my programming skills, but most of all, I
Yeah,
use my basic command line and Linux skills. Nick, what would you say?
yeah, yeah. As someone like I really like programming, but still, like the first thing you need to learn is Bash and networking. Like, and just understanding like the basic networking tools, like especially Nmap, like wrapping your head around all the different commands that go with that. But once you understand Bash, how to work your way around a command line, you're well on your way. You don't, because I learned programming before I learned anything related to hacking, really, and I didn't really get to do any programming or scripting until I learned some of the more basic stuff first. So definitely start with Bash.
Yeah, like I went to school. I went back to school to learn programming. I'm like, all right, sick. I know programming now. Let's do this. And then they're like, all right, to send a network packet, first establish the IPv4. I'm like, oh my god, I don't know what that means. So like I had to go back and fail a networking class and basically have a very intense teacher that taught me a ton of stuff about networking in order to use my programming skills to do Wi-Fi hacking stuff. Because I realized I
Hmm.
didn't know any of the internal Wi-Fi networking stuff that was necessary to get started with this. But again, I failed one networking class and that got me like up to speed enough to get started. So really, you don't need to do a ton of work with this in order to get the basics down. You just need to get your basic networking fundamentals and your basic Linux fundamentals down. And if you can do that, you'll be fine. Like until you find an area you want to start focusing on. So don't put yourself through
Hmm.
like computer college school, like computer science school, like before you even like try out networking or try out some of this other stuff. Because if you're going into cybersecurity, you're going to be using a blend of all of them, and you might find that like you like some of it more. Like learning how to use like Metasploit or something very effectively, and learning the kill chain and learning like all the red teaming stuff. Like, you don't need to be a programmer to do that, and it can be very satisfying in its own career path. And if you're good at it, you could put yourself through college, and not have to like owe any money at all by learning that it wasn't necessary to like get a computer science degree to start earning money in a field you really like. So, just my 2 cents on that. But I find that computer science skills don't help me as much. They definitely help me, but they don't help me as much as my Linux basics, like, frankly.
Definitely. Yeah, like Linux is just used to navigate around the whole system, especially if you like get remote access to a system or you're running a headless system, something like that. Being able to use a command line is very important. And it's not that tricky to learn. It's kind of like walking as a toddler for the first couple of times, like you're stumbling on your feet all the time. But once you get the hang of it, like, I don't know, you just feel so powerful on the command line.
Yeah. Like I love learning how to do bash scripting, or learning how to do some of these other like kind of like cheater languages, because like again, one of my favorite things to do with my friend Brandon was go to computer science like club meetings where they were teaching everyone to do a task with like C++, and like, use whatever language and we would just do it in a bash script that was like this long, and like everybody else would like be like doing proper C++ is like this long. We're like, bash scripting is so superior, but you're just stringing together like Linux programs that do the job, like, frankly, and it works. It's repeatable, like, it's really cool. It's a good way to be able to really shove it in the face of computer science students that when it comes to basic tasks, like what they do isn't that important. When you have when you have a third year computer science student like showing you very proudly like this much code to like do something really basic, I'm like, cool, there's like a Linux utility that does that with one argument. Like, nothing like makes them feel like I should look into basic like command line stuff, because frankly at our school they never taught basic Linux tools. So like they would literally make you build stuff from the ground up to accomplish things that were like like already like tried and true and very, very easy. So for designing prototypes or doing the kind of stuff that hackers do, frankly, these improvisation skills are really, really critical and helpful for just, avoiding spending like a whole weekend just proving that something works or not, when you can just do it with a tool somebody else already wrote and a couple of arguments, or maybe combining a couple tools. So highly recommend bash scripting, highly recommend Linux schools, command line stuff. That is a great way to get started.
One more skill that's like not often thought of as a skill is about like learning how to Google things, like learning how to discover new information, like learn new skills, like understanding what keywords to like search when you have a problem is also a fundamental skill for learning hacking.
Somebody asked if IPv6 subnetting and routing is more complicated than IPv4. Yes. Yes, it is. Basically, our networking teacher's like, yeah, and then there's IPv6. Don't look. It was one of those like don't look down scenarios. Like, you're gonna be fine. You're walking on IPv4. Everything makes sense. Don't look down there. That's IPv6. That's scary. You'll scare yourself. Don't look. So yeah, IPv4 subnetting I can do in my head, and I suck at math. IPv6 subnetting, there's tools for that, and I use them. So yeah, let's see. All right. So I think there was another question. I think it was just the statement of Google dorking, which is funny because I'm going to be doing actually as another series in Google dorking. But I might also focus on like using some search engines other than Google, because I've been less and less excited to use them as I find out how much data they collect and tie to you. So I might do some other, a lot of the same like Google dorks, like work on DuckDuckGo or Yandex or some of the other stuff. But yeah, I think it would be interesting to maybe do
Yandex. Yandex dorking sounds really fun.
Yandex dorking, yeah, it doesn't work quite the same on Yandex. So one thing I also wanted to mention is we haven't figured out why yet, but if you upgrade your computer to macOS Big Sur, then Android Studio doesn't work. So if you want to follow along with Nick's excellent Android Studio series, then don't upgrade yet, because I have not been able to get it to work yet. It just panics and gets very sad. So hopefully that'll be working soon. But if you haven't upgraded your macOS system yet and you want to follow along with Nick's series, then maybe don't upgrade quite yet. All right, so we're running a little bit out of time, but I wanted to also show a couple other things. One of the, I think Zam sent in at least one of these. So what this is some, if we go back to my screen, so this is some analyzed source code from the Black Kingdom ransomware, which has hit a bunch of the Microsoft Exchange servers that were vulnerable to the ProxyLogon exploits. So we are like well into public proof of concepts being like out there and around. So we're at the point now where like, wow. We're at the point now where like there's just a bunch of like, this looks just like Python ransomware with swears in it. So yeah, this ransomware has all the hallmarks of a motivated script kiddie. At this point, like so the message here is like we're at the stage of the Exchange ransomware that like 13 to 16-year-olds who like insist on swearing in their code as variables are now able to exploit like any business that has Microsoft Exchange still set up this way. So like, please, this kid will send you his swearing code and you will get infected. And I bet look, the key to this is LOL. Like this kid might not even get you your ransomware key back. So very funny. Well, okay, I have a dark sense of humor. This is very sad, I guess, that there are still people that are vulnerable to like this quality of code. But when we say anybody can get started in cybersecurity, this is not what we were talking about. Oh, and speaking of proof of concepts for ProxyLogon, if you want to check out this, if this little proof of concept to see if you can drop into a web shell, then you can do that. So there are now like easily accessible ProxyLogon proof of concept scripts that you can go ahead and try out for yourself, because that's the point of this exploit that we're now on. This is no longer a secret. It is no longer for pay. It is now free everywhere, and anybody can write on it. So yeah, we've reached the full cycle of, at least I hope anyway, the full cycle of full and open exploitation. It is now open season on this exploit and available for all. So hooray, isn't information beautiful? Yeah, and so that's it for our planned topics for today, just on time because it's now 2. But because we started a little bit late, I'm going to go back to the chat and we will answer any other questions that you guys have, if you have any good ones. And of course, if you have any other questions, we are going to be doing the fully live episode on Null Byte next Wednesday, so you can get them in then, and we'll have another live Friday episode next week as well. Oh, I also wanted to mention Mike from my team at Varonis has also been doing his, I think it's CISSP certification study or Security Plus certification study. CISSP certification study in the mornings, far earlier than I get up. But if you guys are motivated and you want to check this out, it's a great new series on getting people started, earning security certifications, and having a study buddy to answer questions and generally walk you through what you'll need. So I really think it's great for people who are curious about certifications to figure out what sort of information is required to pass them. So if you want to check that out, then take a look at the SecurityFWD channel and you'll see Mike broadcasting there as well. And you can always check out the Brand Varonis channel as well for the threat update if you want to see more of Killian, because he does that show, I think weekly now, to update everybody on the threats that really big businesses are seeing and kind of what they can do about them. So very, very cool. And for Nee King, who's asking if you can watch this later, yes, all of this is recorded. You can find this on YouTube, or you can go to hackingwithfriends.com and find all of our stuff there. But generally, if you just go to the SecurityFWD, that's SecurityFWD channel, you'll find all of our content, all of our previous streams. And again, we're highly recommending you check out Nick's Android Studio stream playlist, which we've done pretty recently, because we're going to be adding to that. And it would be great to have more people in the chat when we do it who have already gone through the first part. So yeah, it would be great to have you guys there. Where is the other Michael? Oh, sorry. So this is Michael number 3, I believe. Michael, if you're talking about Michael number 1, well, he went to the Squatch conference to try to hunt down Bigfoot, and then he did send us a communication fairly recently, but it didn't make a lot of sense.
Maybe it was Bigfoot.
Yeah, like, so we think he's okay, and we've seen a lot of credit card activity, but if we switch to my screen really quickly, this is the last communication we got from Michael. So I'm not... Yeah. So we didn't conclusively get any information from this, but if you guys have any analysis besides the obvious, Michael seems to be in good spirits and fine wherever he is, you know? And I actually went through this very carefully and listened to the audio, and he's complaining about kitchen islands and how they're not common in the South. Not a coded plea for help as far as I'm aware. He does have very strong feelings about kitchen islands. So it seems like he's just doing his thing. And he seems a little tan, too, if you ask me.
Okay.
All right, I think that's all we got. So thank you, everyone who joined us today. I don't think we got kicked off the internet, so it looks like SecurityFWD is now 1 for 3. Congratulations, you guys. We did it. We'll see you next week. Make sure to catch our stream on Tuesday. And yeah, have a good weekend, everyone. Bye.
Bye, guys.